Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is Sonship Orientation. This is session 88. We had a little bit of a technical glitch in that last session, and so I'm going to back up and read this PowerPoint again. We took this up in Job 38. We're going to start reading in the middle of the passage at verse 6. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? Out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoary frost of heaven? Who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? All of these are the kinds of questions that God is asking Job. And I pointed out to you at the end of the last session that there's a couple of constellations that are mentioned here. We're going to take some time to do that. Before we do, let's keep reading here in Job 38. And I want to back you up here to verse 16, because these are the places you're going to be functioning in when you get up there in the creature. So here we go, verse 16. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Have the gates of death been opened unto thee? Or hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof, that thou shouldest know the paths to the house thereof. Now I want you to just glance back with me, starting in here in verse 16, where he talks about the gates of death and the doors of the shadow of death. And then here in verse 19, he talks about, as for the place of darkness, there are places that have been established in the heavenly places by Satan. He's been very busy. He has been building fortresses at certain points in the heavenly places. Those are some of the fortresses that are going to have to be dismantled before we're going to be able to carry on our vocation. And when he talks about that, as for darkness, where is the place thereof? We don't ever think of darkness as having a place just because the sun goes down and it's dark. This is a specific kind of darkness. He's not just talking about darkness in general. He's talking about a place of darkness that has been set up by the adversary out in those heavenly places. That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof. In other words, there are boundaries associated with that place of darkness, and that thou shouldst know the paths to the house thereof. In other words, remember I told you out in the heavenly places there are ways and paths. You can't just go willy-nilly any way you want to go. And there is a house where darkness dwells. In other words, Satan has set up a residence out there. Somebody's going to go tear that down. Yes. Okay. I got a feel. There's a few folks that are saying take a number, because I want to be the one doing that. But now we're going to come back to this passage in a minute and talk some more about that. But let me just keep you going here in Job, verse 21. Knowest thou it because thou wast then born, or because the number of thy days is great? You know, those are rhetorical. How did Job know? Is it because he was around when all that happened? No. Is it because someone taught it to him who saw all of that? Yes, that would be the answer to that. Verse 22, hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war? Treasures of snow and treasures of hail. And he says, have you entered into those which I've reserved? In other words, God has in those heavenly places treasure houses. One of them is a treasure house of snow. One of them is a treasure house of hail. But it is not the kind you're used to. Once before, He opened up that treasure house of hail and poured some of that hail out on this earth in a particular place. Does anybody remember where that was?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
No. No, you're talking. Sodom and Gomorrah is the fire and brimstone that came from the lake of fire. Egypt. Remember those plagues. And you have hailstones exceeding 100 pounds pounding everything to oblivion. That comes out of that treasure house. That's a particular kind. By the way, guess who's going to have control over those treasure houses?
We are.
You know what you're going to be doing at certain times? You're going to be dispatching angels to open the... You might open the treasure house, and here's the thing I'm coming to understand as a son. You can be as involved or non-involved as you want. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? That's part of that liberty as a son. You can say, I'd like to get involved with these hailstones, but you don't have to. You can dispatch it. See, Beverly's going to go, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to send the angels. Randy, on the other hand, is going like, I'm going. I'm doing it.
You ought to hear their conversations.
Yeah. I could just see Randy saying like, you know what, I can beam them better than you can. Just saying that to the whole group of angels, you know. All right, so here's the deal. You got these things, and look what they're reserved for. Reserved against the time of trouble. Anybody want to take a guess what that's about? Yeah, the tribulation, the day of wrath. Those are going to be poured out then. By the way, are you already going to be up there? You know what's going to be a real shock? All those mid and post-trib guys that don't believe you're getting raptured out till the middle of the tribulation or till the end of the tribulation. When they get that, you know, they just don't understand the programs. They don't understand that there's a fullness of the Gentiles that's going to come in before God resumes that program with Israel. They're going to get that glorified body before that program can resume. So you can't have the tribulation. You can't go to the middle of the tribulation because God's already said He can't start their program till this thing's finished. You've got your glorified body. But you're going to be out there. You know what's? You know, it's going to be almost a shame. How many people are going to have glorified bodies and not going to know a thing in the world what to do with it? Can you just see one of those guys going, well, what's this for?
Get in your corner.
Yeah?
Figured it out the other day when you were talking about this same subject.
Yeah?
This is a class in here for generals. You've got an army, somebody got to be a private.
Somebody got to be a private. Okay, he's saying this is a class for generals and somebody's got to be a private. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, that's true. Not everybody's the same. I have an idea about that. Okay, well, anyway, that's a good thought. That's a good thought. Okay. That's a good thought. But this, you know what? This is a class for generals. This is. This is a class for the folks that are going to run the show. And, boy, what a privilege that is. Anyway, he's asking Job, have you entered into those? He's not asking you, are they there? He's saying, have you ever entered into them? What's the answer? No. Let me ask you a question. If you're going to enter into those, don't you have to know where they are? Mm-hmm. That is a pretty big place out there. Right? I'll just go look for it. No, you're going to have to know where they are. Something about that. Okay. Let's keep going. I'm going to jump you back up now to where we left off in that previous deal before I backed you up to verse 16. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion? Now, I'm going to tell you what is the common thought about that phrase in a moment. But then I'm going to talk to you about what that's really talking about. That was your homework assignment like 2 Sundays or 3 Sundays back. Remember to talk about that? Okay. Let's keep reading. Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? And again, we'll talk about that in just a second. Let's see. Where am I? Let's see. Where am I? Oh, okay. By the way, the ordinances of heaven. I'm thinking this is not the part where I'm going to talk to you about that. I don't want to get ahead of this, so let me just look. Yeah, let's just keep going. By the way, chapter 38 is not the only chapter in the book of Job that talks about these kinds of issues. Because this is sitting over here in the book of Job, by the time you get to the book of Ephesians and you start to get subtlety, the things you know about from Job are going to have to be in your thinking. Not because you're going to be on this earth during the day of wrath, but because you're going to be in the heavenly places in the day of wrath. Now, the information that's in Job isn't anything that Israel can't know. It's just not anything they're going to do. You understand? Just like you know about some things that's going to happen with Israel on this earth. They're going to be the head of all nations. You know that. But that's not something you're going to participate in. You know it, but you're not going to do it. Well, the same is going to be true for them. Job 26 is another chapter that talks about these issues. Verse 7. He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. He bindeth up the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not rent under them. He holdeth back the face of his throne, and spreadeth his cloud upon it. And by the way, that's a reference to him pulling that curtain of when he stretched out the heavens like a curtain, and they hide the face of his throne. He hath compassed the water. By the way, can I just tell you to think, I got to give you something to think about. It's not in the PowerPoint. Turn to Revelation chapter 4. Before all that got all stretched out and all that stuff, and I told you stretch those out to hide the face of his throne. I want to say Revelation 4, but that may not be the right. No, it's going to be 6. I'm sorry, 6. Doing it out of my memory, and that was faulty. Chapter 6. And I want you to notice something. Verse 12. This is the account of the seals in the tribulation. And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. Do you know where on the timeline this is? When you look up at the timeline, where is that 6th seal? Somebody? Bertha, where do you think?
I would say it's tribulation.
Okay. Where in the tribulation? At the end of the tribulation, just before the Advent. I don't know if you remember, but there's 30 days of darkness that precedes the coming of the Lord, where He comes with the brightness of His coming. Remember? All right. I'm looking at that like it's on the PowerPoint. Now you know where you are now. You're right at the end of the... Actually, in the 30 days of darkness, the 7 years of the tribulation is actually... Hold your finger there. We're going to come back to it. Hold your finger there and look at Matthew 24. Matthew 24, and we're going to get a more precise look at it right here. Matthew 24, and look with me in verse 29. Immediately, by the way, this chapter is talking about the things that are taking place in the tribulation. You can look over and say in verse 21, there shall be great tribulation, except those days will be short, and be no flesh saved, and all that kind of business. Then you get to verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So when does the sun, the moon, and stars go dark? Immediately after the tribulation of those days. When Daniel's 70th week is up, when Daniel's 70th week is up, the sun, the moon, and the stars, well, the sun, the moon, and the stars go dark, but it said it different. In Matthew 24, it said, well, let me just go back over there. In Matthew 24, it used the same terminology. It says, the sun shall be darkened, the moon, this is verse 29, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall what? Fall from heaven. Now go back to Revelation 6. And when he had opened the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven, what? Fell unto the earth. Verse 14 in Revelation 6. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they'd have a scroll, and you would open that scroll up, and as you would read in the Hebrew, you'd actually, Hebrew reads from right to left, you'd be turning those things and rolling it up on one end, unrolling it on the other. If you've ever looked at some of those scrolls, some of those are real long, and they just put them on a long table and open them up and that kind of a bit. Well, we have a scroll of the book of Ruth. We actually have a scroll of the book of Ruth that was illustrated in the edges. Anyway, neither here nor there. Think of this. No, it's in Hebrew. Yeah, it's in Hebrew. Yeah, it was a rabbinic scroll that was actually used in the temple. Yeah. Anyway, think of the heavens. Now, just think a minute as a scroll. It says, and the stars fell unto the earth. Now, think, what is that? The stars fell unto the earth. Are stars big? Yeah. Bigger than the earth? Yeah. So you think, well, people look at that and they go, well, that can't be right because if the stars fell to the earth, it would just burn the earth up. Well, that would be true if they did, but then it tells you how. And it says, and the heavens departed as a scroll. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If this is the heavens, and here's the earth, in the midst, somewhere in the midst of the heavens, here's what God's going to do. He's going to roll those heavens up like a scroll. And you know what it's going to look like? They're falling to the earth. He's rolling the heavens up. And heavens departed as a scroll when it's rolled together. When you take those stretched out heavens and roll them all back up, what will you be looking at? Not the creature. Not nothing. Think about how we got into this conversation. It'll be like it was to start with, and what will they be looking at? Let's read it. Yes, they'll be looking at the throne. Remember, I told you, he stretched out the face of his, remember, hid the face of his throne. Remember, we were reading that. Take a look here in Revelation 6. Verse 15, and the kings of the earth and the great men, 14, the heaven departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, the mighty men, bondmen, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the rocks, mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that what? And from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who will be able to stand? How in the world do they know to say that? Because they're looking at it. When those heavens roll together, they're going to be looking at the Lamb. Do you remember that scene where all power is given? Remember, there's one that sat on a throne, and the 24 elders, and John said, I wept because no one was worthy to come and take the 7 sealed book out of the hand that sat on the throne. And one of the elders said, weep not, for behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah hath prevailed to take the book and open the seals thereof. And he said, and I looked, and behold, a lamb as it had been slain stood in the midst of the beast and the elders. And he came and he took the scroll from the hand of him that sat on the throne. And the 24 elders fell down and cast their crowns before the feet of him that sat on the throne, and said, worthy art thou, O Lord, to receive honor and power and glory. Remember that whole deal, Revelation 5? What was it he took out of the hand of him that sat on the throne? The 7 sealed book. What did you just see opened? The 6th seal. And at the 6th seal is opened, the heavens roll together as a scroll. And now you're able to see what was seen before those heavens were stretched out. You're able to see the throne, and guess who's standing there? The Lamb. Do you realize? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is, oh my God, right. That is literally who that is. That is a scene. When we're back over here, now can you look up and see that throne? I thought it was ridiculous when Russia finally sent up their cosmonauts and they said, we looked up there and we didn't see God anywhere. No kidding. No kidding. They had no idea what the Bible taught about that barrier between where we live and where the principalities and powers are. If they'd ever ventured past that barrier, looking for God had been the least of their problems. Principalities and powers would have been in their faces, and that would have been the end of that. That would be a frightening prospect. All right, anyway, back to Job 26. Verse 10, He hath compassed the waters with bounds until the day and night come to an end. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at His reproof. He divideth the sea with His power, and by His understanding He smiteth through the proud. By His Spirit He hath garnished the heavens. And that's a small case S. So guess who that's not talking about? That's not talking about the third person of the Trinity. We need to talk about that sometime, and we will, but I just want you to take note of that, because everybody reads that and they go like, oh, well, the Holy Spirit did that. That's not what that says. God's telling you something else about what's going on here. By His Spirit He hath garnished the heavens. By the way, He garnished them with, guess what? Those constellations He just got through talking to you about. As part of the garnishment of the heavens. His hand hath formed the crooked serpent. I'll just read the rest of it and we'll talk about that. Lo, these are parts of His ways, but how little a portion is heard of Him. But the thunder of His power, who can understand? Now, that crooked serpent, God formed the crooked serpent. And He did that, folks, when He stretched out the heavens. But He doesn't stretch out the heavens until after the flood. Why can't God create the crooked serpent from the very beginning? Tell me why. Why doesn't He, He didn't need to, because there was no crooked serpent. He was Lucifer, the light bearer. Why would you put a constellation up there that showed a crooked serpent when there wasn't one? Not until after there was a crooked serpent. At the creation of the heaven and the earth, the sons of God all shouted for joy. But there was a day when Lucifer's heart was filled with violence and was lifted up. That thing culminated in the flood and his bid to become the possessor of heaven and earth. And after the Tower of Babel, right after the flood, God stretched out the heavens. And from this perspective, you need to understand this. If you're on this planet, when you look up, you see the constellations that are mentioned in your Bible. You see Orion, and you see the crooked serpent, and you see Pleiades, and you see these. But if you're somewhere else in the galaxy looking at those stars, you don't see those at all. You're looking, you understand, it would be like, you understand those stars in the Big Dipper are not all situated the same distance from the earth. Some of them are way off from the others this way. Think three-dimensional with me for a moment. And if we hung these stars up and then got back out in the front and looked, you would go, I see a dipper. But if you walked around to this side and looked at them, you wouldn't see that at all. That was meant to be viewed from this planet. And when God stretched them out, He stretched them out with that particular thing in mind. And his hand hath formed the crooked serpent. Now it's true those stars are for signs and seasons, and that's true. Orion is a winter constellation. We see him in the wintertime. You say it's not out in the summer? Yeah, but he's out in the daytime. You can't see him because the sun is out. You can't see any of the stars. But in the winter, he happens to be out because of the way the year and everything moves. Then he's out at night and you can see him. Well, let me back you back up. Let's go back to Job 38. And now we're going to begin to look at some of these things. Let's look at verse 31. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Now, let's look at these two constellations. Orion's the first one. This is a picture of what you have at somewhere on your notes. On mine, they're at the bottom of the page, but somewhere on your notes. And if you look at, and I need that, you know what? I got that laser pointer in that bag. Can you fish it out of there for me? It's the one that Nancy gave me, and I don't want her to think I lost it already. I think you might be able to see this just as she's doing it. Do you have it? Oh, great. Just pitch it. Thank you. What a gal. See, here, 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 and here. Shoulders, knees, belt, sword hanging on the belt. Do you see that? That's Orion. And in the winter, you can go out because that star and that star are two first magnitude stars. They're some of the brightest stars in the northern hemisphere sky. Rigel and Betelgeuse. I don't know where that name came from. Rigel and Betelgeuse. If you watch the heavenly places, I told you about those stars. Betelgeuse is a reddish star. It's not as hot, but it is a monster. I mean, it makes our sun look like a shelled green pea in comparison to the planet. It is a monster. And the reason you see it so bright is because it is so big. Rigel is bigger than our sun, but it's not nearly the size of the giant Betelgeuse. But that thing is blue-white hot. And that means that light is very, very bright. So because of its hotness, it becomes a first magnitude star. Well, you combine all those up, and what you see is you see that constellation. Now that was an easy one to spot in the wintertime. And then if you look beside that, I've given you a black and white picture of the constellation. Let me just flip it over. Looks like, kind of like that. Do you see it? Well, I say a black and white, a black and yellow. And here is Orion. Here's the bow, here's the sword, here's the shoulders, here's the knees, and that's what you see. Now, let me just show you something. When you get to this belt, let me back up one. You see that middle star in the belt? Let me show you what that is. That's not actually a star. And oh, by the way, well, here they are again with just other stars, but I'll come back to that. That's that middle star. It's a nebula. And if you look through a telescope or pretty high-powered binoculars, you'll see that is not a single star at all, but that's what looks like the middle star. That nebula is so far away that with the unaided eye, it just looks like a middle star in the belt. It's a nebula with billions of stars. But they're all so packed together that when you go out and look at it, it just looks like a single star. And I want you to look at those colors. What's on that is better represented by what's printed on your page. The colors in that thing are brilliant. But that picture doesn't even do it justice. There are hues of blue and red and pink in that nebula that are just amazing to look at. He garnished the heavens with these. It's not just an empty black void out there, but God actually put these things together. Now, I'm going to take you back. Let's see if I can do this here. Take you back. And if you look, you'll see here's Betelgeuse at the top, Rigel at the bottom. Right over here on this, this is also not a star. That's another nebula, and it's called the Horsehead Nebula. I've circled it, and you can just see on this PowerPoint the faint outline of a horse's head. Can you see it on your notes better?
Do you have many more of these slides?
Yes.
Would it benefit to turn that roll on?
You know what? It might. It might. You want to flip them off and let's look? Maybe we get a little better look at it if the lights are off. Some of these are, it's already dark. The images are already dark. But I don't know. Did that come out better on your printed sheet? You can see that? Okay. Now, I'll leave this up just for a second just to make sure, see if it's going to make us any difference when they flick those lights out. I'm hoping that the folks that are looking at the PowerPoint, what's it look like on your screen? Oh, it is better. Okay. Can you see it on the screen? Okay. Yeah, that's a lot better, isn't it? Okay. I don't dare leave you in this condition. You'll all go to sleep on me. I know what's going to happen. Okay. All right. Thank you. That made a difference. I did give you a second image of that, hoping to pull out a little of the color of the Horsehead Nebula. And that is what you're looking at. Let me back up. See right here on Orion? See that star? Okay. See that? That's right there on the side. That's what you're looking at right there. You're going to be there. That's going to be where you're going to work. That's going to be your place. You're going to have a body that can actually get there. And then when it gets there, it's going to reconnect that to every other part around it. And other folks, here's going to be Linda. She's going to take that Horsehead Nebula and she's going to connect that up with the rest of the parts of Orion. And then Pam is going to take the constellation next to that and she's going to hook that, all of her part up. And then you know what? Teresa will come and she'll say, now we're going to hook these two together. And then this is going to, until the whole creature, folks, until the whole creature now has a body that's perfectly in sync with itself. And you're going to bring life and intelligence and connectivity. And you've already read the verse in Job. We just haven't talked about it yet. We just read it. That talks about how you're going to do all of that and connect all of that up to the earth. And that was when you read that part that said about the ordinances of heaven and setting their dominion in the earth. That's part of what you're going to be doing. Now, there's a lot. I tell you, I got really tempted because I have a lot of astronomy books. And they have all these wonderful color pictures in them. And when we got the Hubble telescope up there, that thing was able to take some incredible shots. You look at that and you go, man, that's amazing. Wait till there's life in that. Wait. Just wait. I'm not saying there are not spots on this earth that are not beautiful, but where you're going to be, it's going to be breathtaking. And what's going to be going on there. Let's see. The other constellation was Pleiades. And there it is. That's what's commonly referred to as the Seven Sisters. There's a myth, all of the truth of the Bible has been covered over by men's myths. The story of Hercules and all that kind of business. And actually, let me tell you something about this. I'm going to show you this. Look at this. Now, there's those stars. These two, in the myth, here's the Seven Sisters, and here's the two parents. But the parents are not included as part of Pleiades. In other words, that's just the seven stars. Do you know what they discovered about those seven stars when they got telescopes that can, actually when Hubble got, but I mean, when they got telescopes, and I don't mean to say that. I don't know that Hubble was the place where we discovered this. I don't know that for sure. But here's what we discovered, that just as you see that single, quote, star in the belt of Orion turns out to be a nebula, those stars turned out to be 250 stars. But you know what's amazing about those stars? The U.S. Naval Observatory, looking and tracking Pleiades, said all 250 of those stars are all moving in the same direction at the same rate without breaking their formation, flying through the universe like a flock of birds. Would you like to know where they're going? Orion, on the other hand, has stars that are not flying in concert with each other. Everything is moving. You do understand. Everything is moving. And what they're saying, and here's the way I'm talking about now, saved Christian scholars who are trying to defend the Bible. I appreciate that. They're trying to defend the Bible. And here's what they're saying. The stars of Orion are all moving like this, away from each other. So they say when the Bible talks about loosing the bands of Orion, it's saying that one day that constellation will no longer appear as a constellation and it will be loosed. But it said binding the sweet influence of Pleiades as though it's bound together and it all moves in concert. But that's not what that's talking about. I understand what they're saying. One of them is flying apart, one of them is staying together. So it talks about binding one and loosing the other. But you know what? You'd have to have a telescope to know that. Anything God's going to tell you in His Word, you don't need, a molecular, microscope or the Hubble you don't need to launch the Hubble. You're supposed to be able to know what that is with His Word. You understand what I'm saying to you? As well-meaning as that is. But do you know why they say that? As a matter of fact, if I didn't know about sonship, what I just told you sounds like a pretty good explanation. But when you know sonship, you not only know about Orion and Pleiades, but you have a context there of ordinances and how it connects to the earth, and now you understand God's really talking about something totally different. So those are the things that I want us to look at and discuss. Now, I got a couple of other things to show you. Have you ever noticed all the pyramids? Now, I didn't show the pyramid in Giza. Everybody's seen that one in Egypt. Actually, the pyramid in Giza, you know what you have there? Oh, yeah. I need to erase something. What am I going to do? Let's do this, just because it's in the middle. I know this doesn't sound like exactly the right time to do this, but I got to have a clean board to do this. I'll get rid of that too. Okay. All right, that gives me a little bit of room. Okay, here's the deal. You're sitting over there in Egypt, and you've got this Sphinx sitting over there, and they say it's the body of a lion, the head of a man, and then sitting over here, you've got these three pyramids sitting like that. But if you read in the work, some people say, and by the way, this thing is really eroded now. You do know that. When you go over and look at that, you can tell There's a general outline there. And these are eroded too. This Great Pyramid is, when you're going to set a building, here's what I know about Imperial. Nothing is set to the compass. I don't know about anybody else's town, but Imperial, our house sits just like this, parallel to the street. The sun comes up over here, it goes across diagonal and comes down over here. You know, it's, I mean, and in the winter it takes a little different tack, but you know what I'm saying. This is, the streets are not laid out north, south, east, west. That's not the way they are. In fact, in Imperial we almost don't have streets, okay, but this building, when it was put down, and understand this thing is huge. The footprint of this Great Pyramid is huge. It is the most correctly oriented to the compass building of its size that has ever been erected on the planet. In fact, even today with our technology, we can't build a building that big and orient it to the compass as well as it was done. Just to give you an idea of the precision of that building. But I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is, some of the scholars say this is not the face of a man and the body of a lion, it's the face of a woman. The nose is missing off of it now and other things, and it's actually got that Egyptian type covering over it, so it's kind of hard to tell. But do you know what's interesting to me? And I tend to go with the latter, to think that's the head of a woman and the body of a lion. And I'm not going to take time to talk to you about it today because we could get off on this and get way off track, and I am not going to do that. I don't care. I'm not going to, I know you're all going like, if we just give him enough rope, he'll get out there on himself. Okay, but here's the deal. Do you know what there's something I see in this because of what you're looking at when you look at these three pyramids and this Sphinx, which, if I'm right, is the body of a lion and the head of a woman. And everybody talks about these three pyramids being in perfect alignment with those three stars. And they are. They're in perfect alignment with those in the pyramid. Those three stars that you see right there, and I think I have one more. It's the same thing. You know what I'm talking about. Let me get back over here to this. Because there is astronomy attached to this. And I don't care what your belief is about, you know, the wackos in our society would want us to say that, you know, our sky brothers came down so long ago and built all that stuff and, you know, and all that kind of bit and planted life on this planet and all that kind of, they're just evolutionists wrapped up in a new wrapper. But here's the thing. Here's what I do see the connection to astrology, because I showed you that whole circle of the zodiac and all 12 of those constellations, and what you have in the Sphinx is you have the beginning of the zodiac with the virgin birth and the end of the zodiac with Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. And I see in the Sphinx the beginning and the end of the zodiac. And I really do think that's there. And the whole story lies in between those two. From the time he is born of a virgin into this world until he returns as King of Kings, it's all in those 12 constellations. And I see that. By the way, when you go to the Temple of Dendera, which was excavated out and taken to the British Museum in London, they put the thing totally back together over there in the Temple of Dendera. That's exactly what they did, is they have the zodiac, it's all laid out on the floor like that, and they have all 12 constellations going along, and they have a break in between them right there. And guess what you have? You have Virgo right there, and you have Leo right there. And the break is between those two. If you're going to read that in the Bible, you know that's exactly how that happens. Okay, but here's the point I'm trying to get to. You made me talk about more than I intended to, so I'm going to stop that. I'm going to talk about what I wanted to talk about, and that was these pyramids. The pyramids in Giza, and not just those. This pyramid of the sun. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the Aztec pyramids. You're kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. Oh, but you know what? We left off early on the first session, so I get a few minutes on this one to catch up. All right. It doesn't matter. You can see this on your notes, and I hope you'll be able to see it here. Do you see that circle right there? Every pyramid in the world is built on that circle. Yes, ma'am?
What is the relationship of the Sphinx to the three pyramids? Is it that far away or facing it? Or?
You mean how is it facing? They're off the side almost like I've done it here. Actually, there is a channel that runs underneath, that runs down to, you could orient these a little more this way, and there's actually a channel that runs underground that runs from the pyramid to the Sphinx, and you can travel all the way underground. But even those channels are oriented in very specific ways. One day for fun, maybe I'll do a bare bones on that. I've done some things on that before, but I don't think we ever filmed it. It's back when I was at Glen River Chapel. It's interesting, you know, but anyway, yeah, pretty close to what I've got right there. Anyway, you got all those pyramids at the same arc, all the way around the earth. And some of these, by the way, are built on islands. Now, that seems a little bit remarkable, doesn't it? Okay. Now, again, you know, Quetzalcoatl. Now, this is one of those this is one of those Mayan Indian pyramids. And I detailed this, but I just want to show you that there was you remember that eclipse that we had back in May? Do you remember that, of this year? Let me show you what happened. You can read about it. I don't want to take the time to do it because the buzzer's already gone off and we've got somewhere to go here. But when the illustration that's on the left in your notes, if yours looks similar to this, you've got an illustration here and a description over here. As that eclipse took place, that particular pyramid, not the one in the picture above now, but the one in the drawing there, that thing that is erected on the top of that pyramid showed a serpent slithering down the side of that pyramid as the shadow got longer and longer. And because it stepped down, the shadow's not straight. It appears to wiggle like a snake as it makes its way down the side of that pyramid. And the prophecy, as you look in your little block there, it says that this shadow serpent phenomenon is usually seen during the equinoxes. However, this particular event happens roughly every 26,000 years in May. Keep in mind, it's the Mayan calendar that alerted the world to the year 2012 as the end of a 26,000-year cycle, but not the end of the world. In other words, December the 21st of this year, folks, I'm guaranteeing you, I'm going on tape, I'm guaranteeing you, this is what? July the what? 15th? I guarantee you December the 21st of this year is not the end of the world. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Because I understand what the Bible has to say about the timetable, and we've got a lot of stuff left to do on the timetable. It doesn't even matter if you think we're in the tribulation now. We've got a lot of stuff left on the timetable. It can't be the end of the world December the 21st. The only people that put any stock in that are folks that don't know their Bible or are very superstitious. And so I just want to go on record with that. There is another one that I'm going to give you. I have a verse. I guess I have a verse to give you first. Now, we're going to kind of get ourselves back on track here. So, I forgot I had that on there. Okay, anyway, you can read about that. I don't want to take the time to do it here. You can read about that in the notes. Again, Job 38:31, we looked at Pleiades, we looked at Orion, and then you have Arcturus. Arcturus with his sons in verse 32. And here's what you have. You have Arcturus pictured here. And guess what you have on the tail sticking out right by Arcturus is Serpens, the serpent. Located at that point in the heavens. Now, I'd like to talk, he says, can you guide Arcturus and his sons? Now, there's something else about Arcturus, and that's this. That's how big Arcturus is compared to our sun. Betelgeuse makes Arcturus look like our sun. There's another star that makes Betelgeuse look like our sun compared to Arcturus. There are some huge, huge stars out there that God spoke into existence. Now, just to kind of, oh, by the way, there is an interesting thing here. Arcturus. Our sun is traveling at 12.5 miles per second. In your notes, you'll see that I've told you that Arcturus isn't traveling at 12.5 miles per second, it's traveling at 257 miles per second. Now think about what the Bible said. Can you guide Arcturus and his sons? That star is one of the fastest moving stars that we know of. Going somewhere in a hurry. And so let's do the ordinances. Job 38. An ordinance, think of this. The ordinances of heaven. My dad used to work at the Louisiana Ordnance Plant. You know what that was? They made munitions for the Army. Don't think about that kind of ordinance. Give me a root word for ordinance. Order. Thank you. Right off the bat. Very good. Order. Ordinances are things that are ordered and arranged for a particular purpose. God talks about the ordinances of heaven. Those things are actually the material apparatus that's going to allow His plan and purpose for the heavenly places to be carried out. Now we'll have opportunity, I'm kind of just thinking about the time, we'll have opportunity to talk about these ordinances a little more, but there's something I want to get to before we do this. You can, we will come back and talk about this. This is orientation now anyway. I'm not trying to teach you everything you need to know about it. But those things are held together, folks, by those ordinances. I'm going to tell, look, okay, let me just cut to the chase here. There's a reason it's Orion and Pleiades. There's a reason there are bands and or binding the Pleiades and loosing the bands of Orion. There's a reason behind that. If you loose the bands of Orion, you have gone to the central place in the creature where you could cause the whole creature to come down. It's like the keystone, or the, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the load-bearing piece. I'm looking for another term. Loosing the bands of Orion is the key place. When the heavens get rolled together, those bands are going to have to be loose, because the ordinances is what's holding everything in its place. And those ordinances find themselves in key places. Now, just to show you something, Job 26, by His Spirit He hath garnished the heavens, His hand hath formed the crooked serpent. I gave you on the back of your page there, you'll see the serpent in its constellation, and I thought I had another one in here, and I guess I don't. But let me tell you, here's what I understand about this. The serpent, by the way, is the largest constellation in the heavens. It is huge. And when you look up in the sky, it takes up an enormous part of the heavens. I mean, it really stretches out. And here's what I believe. And again, maybe I'll take some time at the first of next Sunday and we'll do the detail on this right. But my understanding is the strongholds that Satan has built have been given to you as the major places in the constellation of the serpent. And he has built those strongholds not just arbitrarily out there, but he has built them at critical, crucial places in the creature where he and his minions can protect and defend a part of this creature that is necessary to have control of it. Now, I'm not pretending to know everything there is to know about that, because I have a long ways to go in this. But as I see that serpent out there, who formed the serpent? God's the one that set that constellation. That means He's showing you something about those places up there in the heavens. And you're going to know those are going to be critical places to take control of as we dismantle what Satan has put into place up there. Now, I guess I'll reserve this. We're going to say some more. I guess we'll do it next time about the place where darkness dwells, because now we're in that constellation. I believe that that house that Satan has set up for himself in the heavenly places is located somewhere in that constellation. Yes, in Hydra. If you're going to look in the modern day books, it would be Hydra. And as you look up at Hydra, not a lot of bright stars. I don't know if there's a single first magnitude star in it. But listen, those stars are a long ways off, and there's a place up there, and there's something else. And by the way, when you go with the blessed hope, when you're yanked out of here and you're going to go to the judgment seat of Christ, you are going to pass right through that area. It is on one of those, well, I say one of those, that for all I know it could be a multiple of them, but the ways and the paths that are going to take you there, that serpent is stretched out to take control of a huge block of the heavens, and you're going to have to pass right through there to get to the third heaven. Huh? No, the angels up and down, that's a different thing. You know what? There is a danger there. There is a danger there. And remember, I talked about that back in Glen River Chapel days, that I saw something about that. There is a danger that is present there, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that too next time. Yeah, somebody's going to have to go blow that up. Somebody's going to have to go blow that up. And by the way, that's going to be the most heavily fortified of everything in the creature, right there. But the thing is, you have to not only know where you're going, but here's the second thing: you have to be able to get there. God, in His manifold wisdom, has provided for us a glorified body that is able to make the trip from here to there, and guess how long? Just like that. Just like that. Okay, so we have something to do. Now you do realize what we're talking about here probably get me tarred and feathered in most churches. Committed to the loony bin somewhere. You're really going to do this. You're really going to get educated in this. I mean, you're really going to be involved in this. And so now let me end this by saying, when we come back next time, we'll finish up the little dab of stuff that we've got to do with this. I'm going to just take a few minutes just to kind of get all that firmed up, because all I'm doing, you realize all we're doing in orientation is we're up in a plane and we're flying over everything and it's going really fast, and all I'm giving you is some markers. Be like flying over Imperial and going, there's the school, there's the water tower, there's the post office, and look, there's Mike out there in his yard. So that when we come back from surveying it, from getting oriented to it, and we get out of the plane and start marching through the doctrine, as you're on the road, you'll go, oh, look, there's the school. Oh, look, there's the water tower. Oh, look, there's the post office. And you know what that tells you? I'm exactly where I know I'm supposed to be. You're not wondering, where are we going? What are we doing? The orientation gets you to say, look, here it is in a nutshell. You don't really know anything about it. You're just looking at it. You're getting markers, landmarks. Now as you're going through it, you're going to go, we're on the right track. Because when you get to subtlety, you're going to say, in Ephesians, oh my goodness, am I learning something about the finer points of my Father's business and my part in it, because I find out now I'm seated with Him in those heavenly places. That's what subtlety does. And then you find out, oh, you know what? I now have insight into the policy of evil that I didn't have before. And oh, I can see things about the doctrine. Things below the surface that aren't just lying on top of the ground. I can actually see things about the doctrine now. And that's what subtlety does. And all these things that we're talking about, when we come back and go through the doctrine and you begin to learn about that, you're going to, look, you understand I'm talking about this knowing that we haven't yet gotten those 4 decision-making skills effectually worked in us yet. But when you have those and this gets added to that, you're going to be looking at what's going on up there and you're going to be going, oh, I already see how some of these judgments are going to take place. This is going to be great. It might as well be that's what you're going to do. Doesn't matter. There is no plan B. There is no heavenly Tahiti somewhere where you're just going to lay in the shade and sip lemonade. God's putting you to work. But you'll be in a body that'll be fit for it. It'll be work unlike anything you've ever done before. So when we come back next time, we'll finish up this little dab, and then let me give you this commercial. I'm going to talk to you about an area of your sonship we have never talked about before. Something that you won't get introduced to until you get to the book of Ephesians. I don't want to tell you a whole lot about it. There's a couple of reasons for that. But I want you to know that it's there. Because it is one of those kind of jaw-dropping type issues that reminds you again, there is more to this than I... When we first started, do you remember how every little thing was like a, oh my moment? You remember that? But then when you get to where you are now, I know you've been in sonship orientation your whole life. And you're thinking, there's not anything you can tell me about now that's going to make my jaw hit the floor. Well, next Sunday it will. And that's just going to be level 2. And what you got to know is, just about... let me end by saying this. When you get out here past the dispensation of fullness of times into the ages to come, what you're going to find out, that's where you're going to work. That means all the demolition has been done, all the connections have been done, and now we're going to go to work in a fully functional creature. God's going to say, I have ages plural out there. And do you know why? Because at every age, it changes. Because just about the time you're doing it, and you think, okay, is this all I'm going to do? Then your Father's going to go, nope. Turn the page and now look at this. And you're going to go, oh God! And then you'll do that and you'll go, okay, you know, that was really great, but is that all there is? And God's going to say, turn the page. And you turn the page, you're going to go, wow, look at that! And that's the way it's going to be for eternity. That's why it's ages plural to come. You realize what ages are. They are parts of a single dispensation. You have an eternal dispensation that is made up of one age after another, after another, after another, so that the last thing you're ever going to be in eternity with your Heavenly Father is bored. Yes, ma'am?